everybody, and welcome to another one of our video podcast things. Welcome to Poddywood, this time in the video form. Oh, I know it's horrible. I am one of your co-hosts, Steve Hester, and with me as always is...
It's always horrible when you start talking, Steve. But Andrew Roger Carson here. Welcome to a video Poddywood. They do exist. We do actually get them out occasionally.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Too many times, unfortunately. But we are joined this week. Of course, we couldn't have a video episode without bringing one of our most regular guests, one of our most welcome guests. And, well, it's Bill Daly. Bill Daly, how are you doing?
Should I block out my camera now? Then...
You said it was Bob Daly.
Oh God, you'd get some real stories from Bob if he would tell them.
Have you recovered from your trip to Manchester?
I have.
And Weatherspoons?
I have. I even, well, Andrew can tell you, because I don't know if this is anything we talked about when I was there, but whenever it would rain, all I had to do was open up the door and it would stop. Okay.
True.
And then it was working even when I got to Pennsylvania. We've had rain here, not today, but for a few days, and it worked every time up until the last time that I opened the door, and then I got rained on. But it was working. The spell was actually working pretty well. So
look at the Irish. That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, welcome back, and thank you for joining us. We've got a packed show this time around. There's not going to be any of the usual preamble that you get with us reviewing movies or anything else. So let us crack on. Now, what is today's very special theme, Andy?
Basically, today, I wanted to kind of look back 30 years at the movies that Warner Brothers released in 1992. And it's scary to think 1992 was 30 years ago, as I remember these movies coming out when I was a teenager. I was so big into film at that point, and it's really scary looking back, as I remember the previews for these movies and movies that I was going to see, and I actually did go and see most of these movies in the cinema and got kicked out of one of them, which I will tell you about later on. So naturally, we wanted to talk to Bill, who was heavily involved with Warner Brothers at the time, heavily involved in a number of these movies. And obviously, as we always say, IMDb is not the greatest source of information on the planet. Steve?
Rumor control, these are the facts.
Yes. So stop going to IMDb to find out your facts about a film before reviewing it on What's in the Box, please, because you're always wrong.
Hey, I leave all that to you,
So we
listen, sometimes I go there too. Okay. Sometimes I will go there to get information as well, even on pictures that I worked on. And then I'll mostly look at it and go, I don't remember that.
What a bunch of bullshit is basically probably what you're saying. So naturally, we want to wade through some of the kind of trivia that is put out there about these movies. And what better way than Bill Daly, the man who was there around that time. He'd seen all of these movies all the way through post-production to release. And no doubt probably had his hand in a few of them, of saving them and getting out of trouble once in a while. You never know, but we'll find out from these stories. So are we ready to review a selection? Not all of them, because that would take way too long. But we have pulled some of the movies that were the most kind of popular or stand out from 1992. Are we ready for this deep dive?
I need to make a disclaimer here. I was not in post-production when these films came out. I was in the budgeting department assigned to post-production.
So you were handling the money.
I was, but it's a little more complicated than that, because the studio was not using post-production supervisors at the time. So my assistant, Elizabeth Smith, and I were the de facto post-production supervisors on many of these projects. So that's why I know a little bit more than if you would ask somebody else who was in the budgeting department.
There you go. That's the best way to start. And what better way to start with than Final Analysis, the Richard Gere, Kim Basinger, I guess you could call it an erotic thriller.
Uma Thurman
anal
as well.
sex, yeah.
Yeah.
We were calling it fatal paralysis at the time because it seemed like this movie could never get finished. Everybody involved in it was really, really nice. It was a very pleasurable experience doing this movie. But it just seemed to linger and linger and linger. And I think the studio must have had some difficulty scheduling it for its release. Whatever the original release was, when they were planning it, they didn't make that date. I can tell you they did not make that date because this thing lingered in post-production for quite some time. And then it had to go do additional photography. They put a crew together, went up to San Francisco and did the lighthouse stuff and everything at the very end. So yeah, fatal paralysis is what we call this movie. I tried watching it about 6 weeks ago. It was on one of the satellite stations. I put it on and all I could do is shake my head because a lot of it just didn't make sense to me. I just thought it was an incredibly stupid story. I thought it was well done. Photography and everything is good. The sound mix is good. Everybody was perfectly delightful to work with. But this movie just didn't do it. What's the score? What's the Rotten Tomatoes score on it?
Go on, Steve, what's the Rotten Tomatoes score?
Okay, I will look that up. Just out of curiosity, I was on IMDb just now, just trying to.
Oh, for God's sake!
No.
Steve,
I was trying to refresh my memory to see if I have actually seen this. I haven't seen this, but I'm looking at it now. IMDb has it registered 5.9 out of 10.
IMDb, we don't care about that. We're talking about Rotten Tomatoes here, Steve.
Okay, Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten. You guys talk amongst yourselves while I just look this up. Carry on.
Okay, well, while he's doing that, I'm going into Voodoo. Voodoo is it's it's a program. It's on the internet, but they manage your online, your cloud library for you, and they are tied to Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, who was that? Who was the company that was doing that? They were owned by Time Warner, so I should know. Flixster was.
Flixster, yeah.
They were the people that were doing that. Yeah. So, did you find it, Steve? I have. I've got it up here. You are looking at a 56% critic score and a 36% audience score.
Wow.
Okay. So not popular with the audiences, but critics seem to be kind of fair with it, I guess.
Mostly indifferent. Let's just see here. There's 27 reviews. Let's see if I can bring up a few. No, I don't want to continue with any kind of thing. A good reviewer saying Fatal Analysis is gold-plated pulp from Newsweek. A splat from The Spectator says concluded with a level of humdrum normality which made everything that preceded it seem stupider than ever. Someone on Joe Blow's Movie Network, giving it a full star, has said, "Since when did Basinger learn to act? Wow, quite a performance indeed." And then finally, one more.
Obviously, they didn't see her in Batman then, the original Tim Burton Batman, because Kim Basinger was actually quite good in that film.
Yeah,
she showed a level of vulnerability that I'd never seen before, and I don't know if that's a product of getting coached by some of the other actors in it, or if it was Tim Burton. But I have to tell you, I was impressed when I saw her performance in Batman.
One thing I always found kind of interesting about her performance in Final Analysis, I believe she was nominated for the Razzie for Worst Actress, but lost to Kim Basinger in Cool World.
Oh, God.
Which might be the only time that has ever happened.
Oh, boy, if she had a tie, she would have taken home 2 awards.
Exactly. So obviously, I mean, this was part of a cycle of Hitchcockian style thrillers that were kind of popular around this time. So you had movies like Malice, you had movies like Basic Instinct, I guess, can fall into that as well. You had other movies like Guilty of Sin.
Jagged Edge.
Yeah, well, that was more in the 80s.
Color of Night.
Color of Night. Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. Body of
oh,
Evidence.
goodness.
Body of Evidence, yeah. But I read something, and you can tell me if I'm right on this. Obviously, this was directed by Phil Joannou.
Phil Joannou.
Phil Joannou.
Joannou.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a rumor out there that John Borman was originally attached to direct.
I've never heard that. It's possible. Anything is possible. I don't know who the studio reached out to. I didn't get involved with this movie until it was about to be greenlit. So who knows what happened 18 months sooner or 2 years sooner. John Borman would have brought something very different to it, I think. But Phil Joannou was really hot as a director at the time too. And he was a pleasure to work with. But I'm trying to think, I don't think I've ever actually worked with John Borman. That would have been nice. It would have been nice to do that.
I'm trying to think of any movies John Borman did with Warner Bros. I think Excalibur was the only one.
Excalibur, that was before my time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, final analysis. Obviously, that was one of the first movies from Warner Brothers in the year. Kind of moving into the early summer. Oh, no, go on, Bill.
Before you move off of this film, okay? I want to say Richard Gere was one of the nicest people on earth to work with. Absolutely. He was one of the producers, but it's not like he was asserting himself as a producer. I think that was a way to bump his salary. Everybody was concerned with salaries before Jim Carrey got that $20 million payout for the cable guy. Yeah. So a lot of concern over sort of capping salaries so that the studios didn't go crazy with the competition. Eventually it happened with Jim Carrey, and there were some just absolutely amazingly stupid payouts for some of the actors. But Richard Gere was just the nicest guy, and smart. I mean, and that's one of the things that I think you guys have heard me say this before. When I've been in meetings discussing director's cuts and the cards we would get back on previews, a lot of times the lead actors were the ones who had the really, really good ideas. You know, they were the ones who knew these characters probably better than even the director did a lot of times. And Richard was no different from many of the others that I've worked with who came up with great ideas, like Robert Downey and Harrison Ford. I mean, some really people who are really prominent in the business and deserve to be there because they, you know, a lot of times they are pretty much the smartest guy in the room. But the story I want to tell you about this before you move on is that this was the first premiere that Warner Brothers did that I got invited to. Okay, normally at my level, I wouldn't be invited to the premiere, but I got invited to this one. And it was a rainy day. Okay, we've already talked about rainy days. A rainy day, and we drove to Westwood. I took the production accountant with me, and she worked for an outside firm because of the nature in which this film was produced, tax-wise and everything. I took her with me because she had never been to a premiere. And so we got there in the rain. I'm wearing probably not even as well dressed as I am right now, and I'm just totally casual stuff today. But I'm wearing just regular shabby employee clothes, but under a really nice Brooks Brothers trench coat. Okay, and we're walking. We make the turn into the Bruin Theater in Westwood, just under the cover, and all of the press, all the photographers are huddled out of the rain underneath the marquee, watching people coming up the very short red carpet now because of the rain. Okay, and you could see people were looking at me, and I just have this every guy next door sort of look. I look like everybody else. You know, if I remind you of anybody, it's because I look like everybody else, sort of thing, you know? So I can see one of the photographers raising his camera, looking at me. Are you anybody? and he's like, and then he goes, oh, what the hell? And he takes my picture. The flash goes off. Immediately when that first flash went off, they all went off. I mean, everything went off. So I'm sure somewhere in the archives of the newspapers and magazines and everything on the fatal paralysis final analysis premiere, there are pictures of me walking the red carpet.
Nice. Release the Bill Daly images. That's what we want to know.
Yeah.
Didn't they make a riff on this in the last Naked Gun film? And it was they were doing the different awards, and every kind of award was a variation of its fatal attraction, its basic instinct. It was basic attraction. It was fatal instinct.
Yes.
It was instinct after an attraction.
Yeah. Final instinct, basic attraction, and also they just mixed all the words up. That's a David joke.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm sure it is.
Because it seems like there were a lot of these movie types coming out at the same time, and they all had the similar kind of names, and they were all this, right? Okay, we're going to have something which is mildly erotic sounding, attraction or instinct, and then there has to be some other kind of keyword that's added to the name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the marketing department, not really quite sure of what it is they're trying to sell. And they're making it selling what everybody else is selling.
We've got a steamy erotic thriller with Steven Seagal. We need an extra word in there to make it 3.
Are we going to talk about Steven Seagal now?
Yeah, we are. Okay. We are getting to that in a bit. But first, let's move into the early summer now. I like to remember this as kind of the summer of 3, because a lot of third installments for movies was coming out this year. The noticeable ones for the blockbusters was Alien 3, which everyone was waiting for and everyone was kind of disappointed by. And obviously we had Lethal Weapon 3, which was, I guess, one of the major franchises of Warner Brothers at the time. Now you had kind of the ultra-violent Lethal Weapon and Lethal Weapon 2. And Lethal Weapon 3 got released with a lower rating, especially here in the UK. So it kind of came down to 12, 15.
It was originally an 18 for the first 2, and then this one came out as a 15. If you watch it, there's definitely very much a tonal shift. It's a lot more comedic. It's a lot more brighter. The tone is far less politically charged. I mean, you do have the whole kind of cop killer thing taking center stage, just as the tensions in Los Angeles were kind of starting to really kind of ratchet up, along with the emergence of gangster rap, just as you had with things like the Free in South Africa and the Cougarans and the cocaine smuggling and all the rest of it from the first 2, I should say. But then this one took a much brighter tone, particularly because of Joe Pesci.
Yes,
I thought.
Well, they will tell you, if you talk to anybody at the Motion Picture Association, they are sort of the de facto censors in the US, but they will say, well, there's no censorship here because you can put your movie out. You'll get an NC-17, but you can put your movie out. But they're very polite about it and everything. And on paper, what they're saying is true. I mean, the fact of the matter is what they're saying is true, but it's also bullshit, because NATO, the National Association of Theater Owners, won't release an NC-17 movie. So if you go along with NC, there's my son in the background. If you are you getting a snack for everybody, Ian? So if you go with, if you get an NC-17 rating, not that many people are going to see it, because the National Association of Theater Owners are not going to run it. And it's not a question of just this one scene is bad or that scene is bad. Except for the, I'm trying to think of Lethal Weapon 2, except for possibly the sex scene with Patsy Kensit and Mel Gibson. I don't think we see anything in there particularly, but if they had taken that scene out, I don't think it would have affected the rating at all, because the rating board will also come back and say, well, there's an overall feel about this movie. There's a sense that there's eroticism, even if there isn't. So
Yeah.
if you've seen the movie about Hitchcock, where he's fighting over Psycho, and
Yeah.
you can't have a toilet flush, you can't have this woman in the shower. He made you think that you were seeing things in that shower, but you weren't actually. But the way the board, the MPAA goes now, they would say the overall tone of this is that it's a sex scene, even though it isn't. And you can't really argue with them because they don't take those arguments. You have to, and you can't really play them either. You can't play the MPAA. At least our studio never did. We had producers who would come in and try to do that. And we would say, absolutely not, you don't do that. My boss, for most of my tenure there, Mark Solomon, was really, really good at gauging what the Motion Picture Association wanted. And if they needed, if there was something that was the slightest question, Mark would go into that cutting room. It doesn't apply to any of these pictures we're talking about today, but he had the ability to go into the cutting room and say, okay, take that out, shorten this, take that out, that sort of thing, and they'd have to do it. And he had the authority, the head of the studio gave him the authority to do that. Nothing ever got damaged because he would do that, you know, and all these directors agreed to deliver a movie that was R or PG-13, or, you know, I don't know completely what the rating systems you have in the UK. But when a picture starts out, there's a contractual arrangement about what the rating is going to be. So I'm guessing that with Lethal Weapon 3, they probably all agreed that they would go after the PG-13, right? Where the first two were R, I would imagine, right?
Yes.
And a lot of that had to do with the overall violent tone of it all, you know. And in the second one, the whole suicide thing too, that's a thing that the movie studios don't really want to promote. But I'm guessing that everybody got together and said, we're going to do this one PG-13 because the 13-year-olds really want to see this movie, which they did. Yeah. Honest to God, they really did. You know, we could have made The Matrix a PG-13, but the Wachowskis insisted that it go out the way it did. We could have easily, with one cut, made The Matrix a PG-13, and the Wachowskis, who were first dollar participants on every movie in that series, would have tripled their money probably, because every teenager in the world wanted to see those movies. So I'm guessing that they expanded their audience at the time. I wasn't part of those discussions, but they expanded their audience by toning down the violence and introducing more comedy to it.
Well, speaking of audience, and this has just surprised me now, sticking with Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score was 61%, which is strangely low. I was expecting that to be higher, but even lower than that, this is a certified rotten movie on 58% critic score.
What
was the box office take, though?
Oh.
No, the box office take was the 5th highest that year, I believe.
According to this, 142 million gross in the US. Doesn't say anything about international.
Well, it's the highest grossing Lethal Weapon movie out of all of them, I believe. Because I don't think...
and that's the introduction of Rene Russo, right? Yep. Rene Russo was in that as well. So it's Rene Russo and Joe Pesci. You can give the credit to them. I think they expanded the audience, is what they did. They had to change something up. You can't keep sending the same thing back to the audience all the time. And then other people become more interested in it because of its success.
I thought she did a great job. She fit into the cast perfectly.
That was her major launch. I mean, she'd been in some movies. She was in a movie called Mr. Destiny with Jim Belushi. Prior to it, that's I think the only thing.
Major League. She was in Major League.
Oh, Major League. Yeah,
before that.
I'd forgotten she was in that. So yeah, she'd kind of been around these movies since around baseball, funnily enough.
And she was, but she was a model. She was a high fashion model before she got onto the big screen.
Good. And she did a fantastic job. And obviously you had, I want to say, it's Stuart Wilson who was the bad guy in the movie, I believe. But out of the entire Lethal Weapon franchise, I felt he was the least kind of developed bad guy.
Yeah.
Out of the lot. And I'm not really even sure of his motivations for this day. I know it had something to do with real estate.
I think his was just plain money.
It had to, and well, what was interesting about that, I remembered all of this. I remember discussions about it, but I wasn't intimately involved in it. I got more involved with what Richard Donner and Joel Silver were doing when I moved into post-production out of budgeting. But there was a development in that was east of LA on the way to Las Vegas that had run out of money, and we burned it down. All those framed houses and all that.
The Rancho Arroyo.
Yeah, we burned those down for this movie, and then Joel Silver was really well connected with the music world. He got the Eric Clapton, George Harrison song, "The Runaway Train." Oh no, that was Elton John. Oh, George Harrison was in the second movie.
Yes.
Yes.
Eric Clapton, Elton John, "Runaway Train" was on, and then Sting, but they got Sting to do the opening song, right? About the
with the unmistakable Michael Carmen guitar, Eric Clapton guitar riffs.
Yeah.
I love the music in all these movies. It's just as much of a character in it as any of the actors.
And Michael Kamen at the time he really was the go-to guy for Donner and Joel Silver. Really was the go-to guy. We didn't realize at the time how ill he was because he died very suddenly, it seemed. But he was another very delightful person to work with. I loved going to the scoring stages when Michael Kamen was working. It was an experience unlike any other on a movie studio, because you sit, if you go onto the floor and sit in the actual stage with all the instruments, you've got basically a full symphony there. You have 100 pieces, 125 pieces. They're all playing bits and pieces of cues, but you're in the room. It's like a symphony is happening and you're in the middle of it. And it's the most amazing experience. I don't even know how to describe it in a way that would want you to want to do it, but it's just absolutely amazing. And I used to take assistants to the scoring stages all the time, just so that they could experience that, because nobody else was ever going to do it for them. But the music people are always pretty cool and would let you do it. I took parenthetically, I took 3 or 4 people over to Sony, what had been the Lorimar and then MGM lots before that. I took them over for The Specialist. It was Jerry Weintraub produced a movie with Sylvester Stallone and Sharon Stone and James Woods. John Barry did the score. The John Barry score is the only remarkable thing about that movie. I'm telling you.
Apart from that shower scene.
I've seen that one, yeah.
And that score is a combination of James Bond and Body Heat. James Bond basically with the saxophone lead.
Got to be honest, Bill, when I saw it, I wasn't paying much attention to the score. This was the 90s. There was no internet at the time. So
but it was quite amazing. And I grew up a huge James Bond fan, loved John Barry's work. And it was in The Specialist, the score in The Specialist is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary combination of Body Heat and James Bond. Really cool. I'm sorry to steer the conversation away from what we were talking about.
Much better movie. But obviously Stuart Wilson playing the bad guy, but apparently a number of people were approached to take the bad guy role. Apparently, Robert De Niro was in high consideration for that role.
Anything is possible. These rumors get started on the internet, I think, because somebody will be in a meeting room and they will say, what if we get Robert De Niro to do this movie? And then somebody will say, well, we'll call him. We'll make the call and see if he's busy or not. I wasn't intimately involved in the actual production of this movie, so I couldn't tell you yes or no whether a serious offer was made to Robert De Niro or not, or whether he would even have considered it, But he's a very busy actor who's working all the time, and you don't know what he would have canceled in order to do this movie. You know, I can neither confirm or deny that rumor.
There's a possibility. It would have been awesome.
It doesn't seem likely to me.
No.
But
another thing here, renowned actress and guest script doctor Carrie Fisher was an uncredited script doctor on Lethal Weapon 3. Now, as far as I understand, there was drastic
I never
changes.
heard that.
No. From what I hear, originally there were drastic changes to the plot of Lethal Weapon 3. And forgive me if I'm wrong here, I understand at one point, whether it was number 3 or number 4, there was originally some kind of original plot to do with neo-Nazis at the time that got discarded. And I think that might be in line with number 4, where it was replaced with, I guess, the Chinese triads?
Yeah.
And Jet Li.
I have stories to tell you about number 4, but neo-Nazis would have been a great place to a neo-Nazi storyline would have been a great place to go. But that's sounds a little bit more like 2 as well, with the whole, because everybody was hating South Africa at the time, and I pointed out to somebody very quietly, to somebody who was not in charge, I pointed out, and we're talking about number 2, this plot line is so stupid, because if you had a corrupt South African diplomat in the United States, okay, the State Department would have called somebody in Johannesburg or Cape Town, I don't know which is the capital. They would have called South Africa and basically said, this guy is a criminal, he's doing this, he's doing that, and they would have brought the guy home immediately, absolutely immediately. And then you don't have a story, okay? And as bad as South Africa might have been in the world, in the eyes of the world at the time, there was no way they would have sanctioned this kind of stuff from one of their diplomats. I guarantee you.
You can level that kind of criticism against pretty much anything, though, couldn't you? The babysitter would have lived if she hadn't have gone upstairs where the killer was hiding. Suspension of disbelief. You got to let the movie magic work.
No, I know. I was just telling somebody else that this never would have happened.
Well, it's a story that's kind of debated on whether it happened or not, and kind of our last thing to talk on Lethal Weapon 3, unless Bill has some fond memories of it. Now, I believe Warner Brothers, head of Warner Brothers at the time, Bob Daly, and Terry Semel, because they were so happy with how well Lethal Weapon 3 did, they were planning to give Mel Gibson, Joel Silver, and Richard Donner brand new Range Rovers as thank you presents, going to be giving to them at a surprise lunch as a gift. But Richard Donner took the liberty to invite Joe Pesci, Danny Glover, Rene Russo, and Jeffrey Boehm, which necessitated in Warner Brothers scrambling to buy them Range Rovers also at the 11th hour.
Yep, that's true.
Tell us about this.
There was criticism leveled throughout the studio over that, because there was simultaneously with this, there was some measure of cost cutting. Some sort of edict had come around this time from Time Warner in New York about you need to tighten the belt a little bit. You guys are going a little too crazy with these movies. And I remember one person got laid off and complained to the press. I actually knew somebody in the press, complained to the press and said, they're laying me off so they can pay Mel Gibson more money. Honest to God, that was an honest to God thing. Yeah, that's true. That's true. They were scrambling at the 11th hour, and they didn't even make a deal. Like, they could have called whatever the company was before it became Jaguar Land Rover.
Yeah,
they could have contacted the big distributor in New Jersey and said, we need 5 or 6 or 7 of these vehicles for these stars that we want to present them with a gift, but we need you to make a deal. But they didn't do that, and they didn't get a deal. They paid retail. They paid actual retail for all of those Range Rovers. And I don't think I saw any of those Range Rovers on the studio lot more than 2 months after this film was finished. You know, because Mel was on the lot, you know, Richard Donner was on the lot, Joel Silver was on the lot, and they were not driving the Range Rovers very long. You know,
Wonder what they
they
did
gave
with
Zack
them.
Snyder on 300 when 300 was such a huge success. It even caught us by surprise. They gave Zack Snyder an Aston Martin.
Oh, now we're talking.
Yeah. I remember he had an office that was in a building that also housed a big conference room that we would have our Wednesday meetings when we would discuss with the rest of the studio facility and all the departments what the plans were. And Zach had an office in that building upstairs from the conference room, and he and his wife Debbie would park outside the entrance that we would walk up to get into the conference room. And I remember they were pulling in as we were coming out of the meeting. And I said, "Hey, Zach, if you're not going to drive that Aston Martin, give it to me." Okay. Because he wasn't driving it. He drove something else in. And Debbie said, "Believe it or not, it's in the shop already." And Terry Semel had an Aston Martin that was always in the shop.
I don't care. I would pay any kind of mechanics fee just to have something like a DB7, you know, the Casino Royale Aston Martin. Oh, sex
that's
on
what
wheels.
That's what they gave Zach.
Oh, to be getting a car as a gift. But anyway, is there any other thing from Lethal Weapon 3 you wanted to mention before we move on to our next choice?
Oh, I thought of something really funny to tell you. Oh, okay. This is the big, you know, I wasn't able to confirm or deny a lot of the stuff that you brought up, but I can tell you one thing for sure. They fuck you at the drive-thru.
Perfect. And if you're a critic, they'll fuck you if you make a Kid and Play movie at Warner Brothers. Now, Kid and Play, if you're a teenager from the 1990s, you'll know of House Party, House Party 2, House Party 3, even 4 and 5, I guess. But they only ever made one movie away from that, and that was with Warner Brothers. And it was a Prince and the Pauper tale called Class Act, which I actually did go and see this movie, and I've got fond memories of the movie.
I thought the movie was wonderful. I went to an early screening of it, not knowing it was completed. The movie was finished. It might have been the premiere I went to. I'm not sure. But I know I went to an early screening of it, and I had zero expectations. And this movie delivered in every way. It was the most charming kind of teen movie that I could imagine at the time without John Hughes being at the helm.
So was New Line on the lot in 1992?
No,
because that's who did House Party and all of those movies. So how were you originally first approached on Class Act? Do you remember when you first kind of heard this project was going ahead, and were you wondering what it was?
I did. I wondered what it was. I wondered who Kid and Play were. I wasn't quite as up to date on the use of the internet in those days. Basically, my assistant was handling that. I was, what I would do is I tried to take some of the workload off of myself, but the best way to actually train somebody on how to do the job is to have them do it. You have them do it, and if there's a question or issues or something, then you come to me to help you work it out. In this case, my assistant Elizabeth was in charge of that one, and she could tell you a lot more than I could.
One thing that I will, because I might as well do this with all of the movies, seeing as how it's been brought up for the first two. This has got quite a discrepancy between ratings. You are looking at a 17% critic score with this one, which would put it smack dab in our current crop of what's in the bargain bin. However, that is only with 12 reviews. with 5,000 plus reviews. Audience score is sitting at 73%. So there is quite a difference there between the actual people who went in to review it as part of a job and people that just went, no, I like that film, and walked away from it.
Well, I suspect that Kid and Play probably had a lot of fans that went to it and enjoyed it. And then, you know, the critics always try to sound more sophisticated than maybe they are. You know, that I don't know what their expectations are. I had no expectations going in, so I wasn't sure what I was going to see. I wasn't sure whether I was going to like it or not. I only ever walked out of one screening in my entire tenure at Warner Brothers. I only ever walked out of one screening. That actually was a premiere that I walked out of. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but this was one of those things where I had no expectations and came out, you know, delighted with what had happened. You know, I mean, we put out a good movie. It probably did fairly well at the box office too, and apparently it was a crowd pleaser. I'll try to hide him.
I'll have a Coke.
Yeah, I have the headset on. He can't hear you.
Yeah, grab an extra 2 for all our listeners.
Yeah.
But obviously, it was a nice plug between Lethal Weapon 3 and what became probably one of the biggest movies of the year. The most anticipated movie of the year, obviously, for me, was Batman Returns.
Yes.
And I don't think any of us expected what Tim Burton was going to do with this movie following the first movie. The tonal shift was gone from a traditional superhero movie to a full Tim Burton movie.
Yes.
Now, we recently did the walk around Warner Brothers with Johnny Mattug, and we'd seen a lot of the spaces where it was filmed. Apparently, 50% of the Warner Brothers lot was taken up by the sets from this movie. Is that right?
The exterior lot, yes, absolutely, and portions of the lot that normally you don't see taken up by productions. So you no doubt remember the metal grill that's still in place. It's been there for 30 years now.
Yes.
Metal, because that drove the Batmobile. The Batmobile was like on a track, so it was getting pulled like a cable car. That's still in place on the lot. I don't know that the cable still works, but they never put blacktop back over that. The metal plates are still there. The Flash building is still there. That was slated to be torn down. The Flash TV show that I think initially aired in 1990 or 91, 92, maybe around there. They had built a building on the back lot that's very sort of gray and Gothic looking. And that was slated to be torn down when the show was canceled. And Tim Burton said, no, I want that. I want that up. And then they built a little extension to it that's similar in style, a little more Art Deco than Gothic, similar in style. They don't look out of place next to each other. And so that was built for Batman. And then ER used that for over a decade. And that's still there.
And you can see the video of Bill talking about that on the Poddywood Facebook page. If you scroll through, you will be able to find that on it. There was so much to talk about Batman Returns. It seems to be a kind of recurring thing that you always seem to kind of talk about. So I tried to keep the notes on it very different from obviously your Sean Young story, which everyone wants to know. And you can check out on the Poddywood Facebook page. We have a video of Bill showing exactly how it happened, where it happened, and where he found Tim Burton hiding for his life.
all renovated though. I didn't realize the extent to which that building had undergone renovations, because the doorway's not there anymore. It's just a wall. The window that was my office is totally different configuration now. It used to be a big picture window, and now it's like in 3 pieces. The men's rooms have been completely redone. I mean, they're much nicer now than they were, but so on some level, I'd be disappointed if they were still the skanky men's rooms they were 30 years ago.
I remember when we were saying, when we were leaving there, Warner Brothers hopefully one day in the future will put a bronze statue of Tim Burton hiding in that bathroom.
Yeah, if Ethan Dettenmeyer ever becomes the head of the studio, that would happen. Ethan Dettenmeyer being the guy who runs Combat Radio and Brigade Radio 1. He's the one most enamored. He's the one person in the world most enamored with Sean Young and keeps bringing it up.
Yeah. And hello, Ethan, if you are watching, we love the show. Also going into this, so I found some interesting things that I wanted to know if it's true or false. One, the penguins for Danny DeVito's Penguins character, the real ones, were actually flown over in their own compartment and had their own refrigerated trailers and swimming pools on the lot.
That is true.
Okay. Tell us more about this, Bill.
So, well, the thing is that they came from, I think the penguins, of course they come from Antarctica, but the particular penguins on that shoot either came from Argentina or Australia. I'm guessing Southern Australia. They're valuable animals. You need to take care of them, and you need to keep them in refrigerated, if not frozen, climate. Even when you see them in a zoo, do they have them in the zoos in the UK? Yeah. Do they have penguins?
Mm-hmm.
Can you get over the stench when you go in there? I mean, they're pretty wicked. The smell of those things, but yeah, they had, they did have penguins. The thing is that everybody wants to be, if you have any animals in your films, then the American Humane Society gets involved, and everybody wants their stamp of approval, because they will go on the air and the internet and everywhere else and complain about you if you haven't approached them, and if they think that a dog or a cat or a mouse or a cow or a penguin has been abused or mistreated.
Well,
so you got to take care of them, and yeah, so they were treated with as much care as Michael Jordan's basketball players in Space Jam.
I don't know the reference really. It's been so long since I've seen that film. I don't know, but
when we get to 96, we'll tell you all.
One group of people who weren't happy was McDonald's, apparently, wasn't it? When it came to the tie-in with the Happy Meal toys, because I heard a rumor that McDonald's were unprepared for just how dark Tim Burton was taking the film. And there was a whole kind of backlash with parents groups and McDonald's copying it. How much of that is true, do you know?
This is the first I've heard of that. I know that Warner Brothers for a long time had been trying to do a tie-in with McDonald's for especially the kids, the Warner Brothers Family Entertainment stuff. So I'm not surprised that McDonald's would have been approached. I don't remember those Happy Meals at the time. I don't eat at McDonald's generally. I mean, it's not like I have never gone there, but I have. Even probably back in the 90s, I have, and but even before I was a parent, But I don't specifically remember that at all, and I wouldn't blame McDonald's for the dark turn. Tim Burton was pretty much given carte blanche to do what he wanted, because he did so well with that first Batman. And Tim has always been hit or miss. He either strikes out or he gets a home run every time. There doesn't seem to be very much in between.
No. I've got a fond memory of this one, because this was the very first movie that I ever went to the cinema to see by myself. And I was 12 years old, and I just thought, you know what, I've got nothing to do today. I think it was the summer holidays or something, and just went, I'm going to go to the cinema, and just sat there. And to make things even better, I had the entire place to myself.
Really? Private screening?
Pretty much.
How was the film? How was the film?
I loved it.
Oh, good, good.
My favorite one until Christian Bale came into it.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other conversation too. The
Yeah.
thing, the philosophy with Bob and Terry when they were running the studio was that because Batman came from comic books, that it was basically a children's thing, and they approached it as a children's thing, which is why they would go to McDonald's, I guess, because in their mind it was a children's thing. And I remember in when we did Batman and Robin, that was the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger and George Clooney. They were upset. We did an audience preview with for research where we got cards. We did it in Las Vegas, and they were upset that that Las Vegas was chosen. They didn't think it was an appropriate place to get kids, you know. So, but it worked out well enough. I don't think we did a second preview anywhere of that movie. Perhaps we should have, seeing how it came out.
Yeah.
Okay, I was looking in here. Apparently, the Catwoman posters are probably the most stolen posters in history from bus shelters.
Yeah, you know, I hadn't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I'm wondering now if I have any.
Apparently, they're worth a lot.
Because I have so many posters from my tenure at Warner Brothers that I would get them and roll them up, and they're in my garage, and you've seen where I keep them, right? And how many? I must have thousands. I must have thousands of posters there.
I'm thinking a trip to eBay, don't you?
I really should. Well, that's the thing is I really should go. It would be a full-time job just to catalog them.
True.
You know, and not just the Warner Brothers things, because I have some collectors ones as well, up to Quantum of Solace. I don't remember if I have Quantum of Solace, but I certainly have Casino Royale. I have every original James Bond poster.
Wow.
All the way back to Dr. No, I have.
I've seen the Tomorrow Never Dies one in your garage.
Yes, in all of them in pristine condition. And not just as I started to make more money in Hollywood, as I started to move up in my positions. So like even in the Roger Moore series. So I would say I keep thinking the fly who bugged me, the spy who okay. I keep doing the funny title, the fly who bugged me. I have a one sheet of The Spy Who Loved Me in absolute pristine condition. And then after that film, I have like the A, B, and C versions of the one sheets as well.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think, and then the question is, do I sell them as a collection? I mean, the James Bond ones, it seems to me that would be more valuable as a collection if I wanted to sell them on eBay than one by one. Because who wants Moonraker, really?
No.
Well, one thing about Catwoman that cannot be stolen is the memory of Michelle Pfeiffer whip training outside your office, Bill.
Yes. It's I don't remember. Is that in the video too?
No, you told me about this while we were there.
But you don't have it. I showed you where you didn't film me doing that?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer was getting training to do the whip. She learning how to do the whip, and she was out. We had the building 133, also known as Producers Building 1, where my office was at the time, had an inner courtyard. You'll remember the inner courtyard, then an outer courtyard, and in the outer courtyard, Michelle was practicing the whip. Okay, and we only saw her out there one day doing it. She was wearing this black leotard. Okay, it had to be spray painted on. It was so tight. I would bet anything that the mark from my tongue is still on the window. Okay.
Thank God it's your tongue.
I just, oh my God. Oh, the things that we used to see. Just it was oh my God. If I had if I had an iPhone 13 then I would have been going steady with that video all these years.
Okay.
Just in case anyone's interested, because I've pulled up Batman Returns. This is the highest score so far. 73% audience, but with a certified fresh, it's 81%.
Yeah.
Really?
Critic score. But we can't talk about Batman without just touching on a little bit of news that broke this afternoon. That Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman and Bruce Wayne in the animated series and the Arkham video games, passed away today, sadly, age 66. So he, for me, was always my Batman. And yeah, we're going to miss him. So thank you very much for everything that you've done, Kevin. Rest in peace.
Yes, definitely. It was someone that we actively wanted to look to bring onto the show. And unfortunately, it's never realized, but the memories always still remain.
Yeah.
And in getting back to kind of Batman Returns, which was obviously the movie around when Batman, the animated series, was released, and probably took the most influence from. Apparently, this was the first film made in Dolby Digital. Is that correct?
Well, Dolby Digital being the sound.
Yes.
The first time it was that is possible, but unlikely.
Was it Dolby SDR or something
well,
like that?
It would have been, well, Dolby SR was already there.
Yeah.
The spectral recording was just, Dolby started as a noise reduction system. And so that's what it was Dolby noise reduction. Then they started doing spectral recording, and that was sort of an enhancement for cinemas, because when you really wanted to get really good sound in a theater, they would release it in 70 millimeter. Okay, they didn't shoot it in 65 for a 70 release. They would blow it up. They would take an original 35 negative and blow it up to 70. But the draw was not the picture being 70 millimeter as much as you had 6-track magnetic sound. The magnetic recording had a much better response. The audio was way better, just in every way than the optical tracks. And they would do 6 tracks. You'd have either side of the film, and then you know, left and right, but then you'd have tracks on the back as well. So the 70 millimeter would pass through the projector, and because you can't have both the lens and the audio in the same place, the audio is always advanced so many frames up on the film, so that the picture and the sound don't exist in the same spot physically on the film. But with 70 millimeter, the magnetic tracks actually have to come into contact with the sound heads in order to reproduce the sound. So the film then becomes very subject to abrasion. So if you wanted to see something in 70 millimeter, you needed to see it the first couple days, because otherwise you've got a trashed up print. So I recall Dolby Digital coming later, and I don't know exactly when. I just find it doubtful that in 1992 that Dolby Digital would have been the way we were going. I don't see that. I think it was closer to 97, I would say.
Okay.
I don't know for sure, but that would be my guess, around 1997 or so. Well, we were always having a double inventory. What we did was a double and triple inventory, because the original was Dolby A. Dolby A was the original, and then Dolby SR, the spectral recording. And then when we went to Dolby Digital, we we meaning the studio, not just my department, but we, the studio, got tired of having multiple inventory on all these prints. So we got together with Technicolor and created the quad track. So if you pull a film strip out, and I didn't imagine in a million years that we would get on this topic, but I have in my garage, I could show you examples of what they look like. So the film, so you have your 35 millimeter film strip like this, and then on the outer edges is Sony STDS, and then on next to the picture on one side is your stereo Dolby SR optical tracks, and then in between the Dolby SR where they are and the picture. So I'm talking about the geography of the actual 35 millimeter S tape. You would see a dotted line, and that's a time code that runs a DTS disc, because DTS is it runs on a CD, separate CD. Yeah. And then in between the sprocket holes on one side is Dolby Digital. And if you get a magnifying glass out and look very close, so you can actually identify all of those, and you can see the Dolby thing because it's slightly different color. It's sort of an amber color in there, and the Sony STDS are kind of blue in color, left and right. So I'm sorry to get into this technical stuff, but
the anatomy of a film cell.
Well, there we go.
It's all different now. It's all digital.
Well, also in getting back to around the movie, so Michael Keaton apparently earned $11 million for his return as Batman. And the rumor is that Warner executives were very uneasy about that figure.
I'm sure they were. It was more money than anybody else was getting at the studio, if that number is true, which I can neither confirm nor deny. So if that's true, yeah, they would be, because everybody, the escalating costs. We were trying to hold the line on so many different things then, and it wasn't until Mark Canton moved from Warner Brothers over to Sony, and then the Jim Carrey deal, that the salaries of the lead actors just exploded like you wouldn't believe. So yeah, if he got $11 million, that was $11 million up front against a percentage of the gross. That's what my guess would be.
So like the Jack Nicholson deal on.
Well, that was the Jack Nicholson deal was an either or. It was okay, Jack, you're gonna get a figure, and I don't know what it was. I was still doing television. I was with Lorimar, which was part of Warner Brothers, but I was with Lorimar at the time of the first Batman. So, but Jack made like $80 million or something, because he got a percentage of the gross. He took a lower fee and opted for a percentage of the gross, and then he was also getting a percentage of the merchandising and stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So after this film, after Batman Returns, right? Was that Batman Returns?
Yeah.
With Danny DeVito. That's when they started to change the merchandise away from the movies and towards the animated series, because the Batman animated series was enormously successful, more than anybody imagined. It was just amazingly. So then they took all the merchandising stuff and tagged it to the animated thing, and that way they could stop having to pay Jack Nicholson. I mean, it's cruel, but that's sometimes how business works. Yeah.
It was a great series.
So yeah, they would have been nervous. They would have been nervous about that, about paying anybody that kind of money, an upfront fee. But I'm guessing that because eventually it became, you get this fee for as an upfront against, so you get a minimum $11 million, but you're really getting a percentage of the gross. And I would bet anything. Now, I don't know. I know I'm an insider on this, but I don't really know the answer to the question. But I would bet that if that was what Michael Keaton got, it was because of what Mel Gibson got to come back and do Lethal Weapon 3.
Yeah.
They pulled out all the stops to get him on there. And if that movie seems deficient to you in terms of action and stuff like that, it's because they made compromises with the below the line costs in order to pay Mel.
Yeah.
You know, and when Lethal Weapon 4 came out, between 1992, when Lethal Weapon 3 came out, and 2000, was it, or 1998, 1999, Lethal Weapon 4?
98.
Okay, 1998. In the interim, like Mark Canton had left, Bruce Berman came in as head of production, then Bruce Berman left. Bruce, I think, left around, he left simultaneously with Forrest Gump and Braveheart. Okay, they were not our movies. We didn't end up making those movies, but there's a story attached to that, which we'll address another time. But Bruce ended up leaving, and then it became Billy Gerber and Lorenzo. And by the time Lethal Weapon 4, it was just Lorenzo de Bonaventura. He was so desperate for a hit. They pulled out all the stops to get Lethal Weapon 4. They paid ransom money. Honest to God, they paid ransom money to get that movie made. And that movie paid off. It did pay off, but it was, I don't think the budget was ever actually approved. Okay.
Right.
So we were doing cost reporting on that at a time, and we had nothing to compare it to because there was no budget. Basically, do the movie, get it done. We'll do anything to get this done because there had been a string of failures leading up to that. Not Lorenzo's fault. A lot of stuff put into play before he came in there. It's just, things shift. But they were so desperate, and it got them back on track. Lethal Weapon 4 did enormously well, and when you're doing well, you attract talent from other places. So, one hand washes the other. It's a vicious circle.
Well, the good news is, in regards to Batman Returns, is at the time it broke a record, making 47.7 million in just its first 3 days of release.
Yeah. Yep.
Which was only surpassed by Jurassic Park the next year.
Yep. Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it was the record holder for that year.
Yep.
And obviously, everyone at the studio must have been gleaming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we were betting, it wasn't the first Matrix, I think the second Matrix, we were betting that we would break the 100 million threshold for a weekend. Because up till Lethal Weapon 2, up until the second Matrix, nobody had crashed through 100 million in a weekend yet. And neither did that one. It came just short. And then somebody else broke it. I don't remember what picture it was, but I remember
Lord of the Rings, I bet you.
Probably the Avengers or something like that.
Oh, God. No. It was shortly after. It would have been... So the second Matrix was, first Matrix was 99, second Matrix was probably
2002.
2002. Yeah. But we had Harry Potter in the meantime. Harry Potter didn't break that in the first weekend.
Wow.
Maybe not. But it, Joel Silver was just betting that he was going to do that. Maybe it was even the first Matrix. Maybe he was thinking the first Matrix would do it. But people didn't know exactly what it was yet. And I remember telling people they had to see it. That, as I've said earlier in this program, I don't know how to describe it in a way that would make you want to see it.
Yeah.
But you got to take my word for it. You've never seen and you've never heard anything like this, because sonically, the Matrix really came through in a big way too. You've never heard a movie up until 1999 that sounded like that. And of course, we won all the post-production Oscars that year: editor, sound mixing, and visual effects all went to the Matrix. But we're not talking about 1999.
No, we're not.
1992.
No. So in getting back to 1992, here's some quick trivia things, true or false from you, and any clarification on them is fine. Security was so tight that even Kevin Costner was refused entry to the set.
I would believe that. I hadn't heard that, but I would believe it.
And obviously he was doing The Bodyguard, which we will cover a bit later, or in part 2, I reckon. Also, Warner Brothers had to hire a private investigator when photographs of the Penguin made it into the tabloids.
Yes. They didn't have to, but they did. I don't
Okay.
know where it went. They did that stuff all the time. And it wasn't so much that they hired it's not like they went out and hired Jim Rockford. They
James Garner needed the work that year.
No, it's not like they called some detective agency. It wasn't,
a dame walked into my door.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't the Pinkertons, and it wasn't Philip Marlowe, and it wasn't Jim Rockford. They got an investigator from probably the LAPD or the Burbank Police Department, to be my guess. And at some point, I believe it was after 9/11, they hired the head of security was a Secret Service agent. They hired a guy from the Secret Service to become. He was a really good guy, Jim O'Donnell. Really, really good guy. But they have a different way of looking at the world. Everything is a threat. Everything is a security breach. I do remember this stuff with the costumes and all that, and I don't know what the eventual outcome was, and I don't know that. Oh God, I have mixed feelings about this. I mean, I'm not trying to be careful. It's just I don't know what to say. Okay, they
that should be written on your gravestone one day.
They go off on these tangents, so suddenly something happens and somebody says, we need to get to the bottom of this. Okay, so they pull out all the stops and they hire an investigator, and then we never hear what happened in the end, because then they get busy, their attention gets drawn to something else. Okay, and that's usually what it is. So I don't know what the outcome of this was. We had a similar thing with
is it the Mr. Freeze, Arnold Schwarzenegger?
There was something there, something about that. They were taking away their mobile phones. Like they were hiring a lot of extras to come in on the Poison Ivy. Was that the one with George Clooney?
Batman and Robin, yeah.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, I remember Batman and Robin. I remember my first look at the Mr. Freeze costume came on Entertainment Tonight from a behind-the-scenes photograph someone had taken.
Yeah.
And it was like, they were bastards. Why?
They were searching the extras. They were searching all the extras they had hired to keep them from bringing. And I don't think all the phones even had cameras in them yet, but they were preventing people from bringing cameras in. And then it became a challenge for everybody to bring cameras onto the sets, and that, they had I don't mean to be hypercritical of Warner Brothers, but I could tell you, I saw some really silly shit in my day. So they had this big announcement because somebody had stolen. Okay, somebody stole animation cells, acetate animation cells. Okay, and there was this big investigation, and then we never heard the outcome of that. And the outcome was that one of the employees saw the stuff in the trash dumpster and retrieved it and took it home. And all of a sudden he was like stealing stuff from the studio. And then they were so goddamn embarrassed by all the publicity and everything on that they just let it die somewhere. I don't know who the guy was that took the stuff, but it was in a bin. The studio never valued stuff like that. Okay, they had when Christian Bale went crazy on the DP.
I knew this was going to segue into the story.
Because this one really irritates me. So Christian Bale was yelling at Shane Hurlbut. Was that his name? The DP?
I think so. On Terminator.
On Terminator. Yeah. Terminator 55. Because he had crossed his sight line. Okay, so that happened, and then we read about it because it made the newspapers in New Mexico where they were shooting, and it was like, wow, okay. And then we're all wondering what's going on, what happened to Christian Bale, what, you know, he was such a nice guy. What's this all about? We're just kind of wondering what's this all about. And then you don't think about it again. Okay. And then the audio of it appears on a radio station. I was shocked. I was leaving a premiere. We were having a premiere at the Chinese one night. It was a Monday or a Tuesday night. That's usually when the premieres were. We're having a premiere, and I'm pulling out of the Hollywood and Highlands, out of the ramp, you know, from their parking structure, and I'm suddenly getting a radio signal, and I'm here, and I hear Christian Bale yelling at, you know, and because the guy had crossed his sight line and everything, and it became this big scandal and everything, and then they questioned everybody. Jim O'Donnell came to my office and he's questioning me. And it was clear to me they had a target painted on my back. And that's why I find this so irritating. And then what I heard was that they zeroed in on someone else. And I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to damage anybody's reputation here, because nobody really knows, except whoever might have leaked it maybe knows. I have an idea how it got out, but they wouldn't listen to me. But anyway, I had heard that they were questioning somebody about it, somebody that they thought might have been involved, and then the guy said that not to talk to him, to talk to him through his attorney or something like that, you know. And then they all said, "Oh, well, obviously that's the guy," you know. And I thought, and I couldn't say anything. But I was a pubic hair away from saying that myself. It was obvious to me they had painted it, and I was so irritated. They kept calling me. He came to my office. He brought Burbank police detective with him to my office, you know, and then they're on the phone. They called me on the phone, and it was obvious that they were recording me, because we already had this conversation. Why are you calling me on the phone? Why would you call me on the phone? Why wouldn't you come to my office if you've already been doing that to me? You know, so it was obvious to me they must have been recording my voice, and I don't know what they thought they were going to get from that, you know. But the fact is that I had nothing to do with the release of all that stuff. But I'm, you know, I got so irritated by it. I started very quietly doing my own little investigation of it, and I think I have a really plausible candidate for that. You know, but again, I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that, or what the position was, because there's no need for me to damage anybody's reputation. But there was never a resolution to that, as far as I know. You know, and I even said to them, because it was released, I heard it on the radio, but it had been released through TMZ, and they were saying, well, we're going to go after whoever, you know, we're going to sue them, and you can't say anything. And I'm an incredible smartass. You guys both know. Okay, you spend enough time with, you know, I'm an incredible smartass, and I just kept biting my tongue because, like, TMZ was owned by Time Warner, so who the fuck are you going to sue? I mean, seriously, you know, you're gonna go after somebody for taking material from Time Warner and giving it to Time Warner, you know? And I remember even saying to Jim O'Donnell at the time, you know, if I know how you can find this out. You know, if TMZ paid for this, you get Time Warner to audit their books. Oh, we can't do that. Well, we can't do that. And it's like, well, why not? Well, we can't. They don't want to question the journalistic integrity of TMZ. And of course, I couldn't say anything. But I'm thinking, journalistic integrity. These are the guys who stand around the Palm trying to get a picture of Britney Spears' snatch. Okay, seriously, journalistic integrity.
Right.
Go ahead, cut that out if you want.
No,
No, that's staying in.
No, that's staying in. We're not editing stuff. Okay, the final two things on this before we seek into, well, I guess we'll leave the other parts for part two, which we will record. The final shot of Catwoman in Batman Returns was added only weeks before the film opened. So this is where
I wouldn't be surprised.
Catwoman is looking up at the bat signal at the end to prove that she is still alive.
Yeah. Well, they had, I don't know if they were planning to bring her back. Tim, of course, never returned to Batman after that, but everybody loved her as a character. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer was just so good. Have any of the Catwomen since her really done it for you?
No.
In what way? Because I'm not gonna lie, Anne Hathaway looked great in the leather. But no, I think she was a wonderful character. This damaged vulnerability that probably shone through this kind of fractured
and a fully
psyche.
fleshed, but a fully fleshed character as well.
Yes.
You could totally believe her. She wasn't. I love Anne Hathaway. A lot of people don't, and I don't understand why not. But I love Anne Hathaway, and I thought she was perfectly suited for the job that she did with the Chris Nolan when we graduated into Chris Nolan world with Batman. But for me, Michelle Pfeiffer is Catwoman, not Halle Berry, and not Zoe, what's her name?
Kravitz.
Not her. And then Zoe, I read in the press that Zoe claimed that they had approached her about doing some sort of character, like this character in a previous incarnation, perhaps the Anne Hathaway, but they weren't ready for a person of color. Okay, total fucking bullshit. Okay,
but if the kid was
and I don't care who hears me say that. Total fucking bullshit, because it was Anne Hathaway from day one. In that, I never heard of Zoe Kravitz at the time. Nobody had.
Well, there you go. Straight from mouth for babes. And yeah, I will honestly say that in the entire movie of Batman Returns, she is the character with the full story arc.
Yes.
Out of all of the characters in that movie, you can argue that it is Catwoman's movie.
Well, it is. I mean, if you look at even the James Bond movies, James Bond never has an arc, except the final one we did with Daniel Craig. I mean, there was an arc there, but he's always going to be the same guy. He'll come back a little more battle scarred or a little more paranoid, but he's always just going to be James Bond. The main character is always the villain. And in the early Ian Fleming books, the villain was the name of the book, Dr. No, Goldfinger, Drax, well, although it came out as Moonraker, but the main character usually is the villain. And so in that regard, she really is the main character of this movie, and she's a lot more, the character is much more developed than the Penguin is.
Yeah.
Or Christopher Walken for that matter.
Yeah.
He's Christopher Walken doing what Christopher Walken does best, but the character itself is just real estate guy wants to get a bit more power. That's it. There is nothing going on there. But like you say, with Catwoman, she's rounded out all the way. Goes through a proper character transformation and then goes through a secondary one towards the end.
Right. And they wanted her back, which is why that final shot is there.
Well, to round out on Batman Returns, the very last part of it here.
We talking about Pee Wee Herman appearing at the beginning?
No, I'm not going on the Pee Wee Herman thing. Even though apparently that was also suggested to be Burgess Meredith at one point as well.
Oh, that would have been good.
Apparently.
He was, but Burgess he was really, really old, and he was doing, I don't know what year. Yeah, we did Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men. And he was slowing down. Because we had contacted him, not me, but Tom Proper, who was my predecessor in the position when I became director of post-production. Tom had to contact Burgess about doing his ADR work, and Burgess was like, but I died in that movie. It was like he had somehow hadn't registered that he had to do ADR. So we thought, okay, he's starting to slip. We need to be careful with him. And I don't think he lived for very much longer. I don't remember exactly, but So I that would have been a horrible burden to put on him at his age,
Yeah.
I think, in this film.
But the one story that I did want to cover to end on Batman Returns, Bill, is there any truth to the rumor that Batman Returns' first script by Sam Hamm was about the Penguin and Catwoman seeking hidden treasure?
I don't know. I never saw the original script.
Which would not surprise me from Sam Hamm when you've seen him in the documentaries for Batman. But get the Catwoman and the Penguin.
I think Steve's going to wet himself there. You know what? Nothing.
I just
would
picture the
surprise
two
me.
of them with like a pirate ship.
It'd be the Penguin's duck, and they're basically
Yeah.
just sailing out to find this hidden treasure. How would Batman play into a hidden treasure plot?
You know what? Who knows?
You know,
Who
Sam
knows if
Hamm,
that's?
you've got to message him and ask him.
But who knows if that script ever was given any attention?
Well, obviously it wasn't.
You know.
Oh.
So I think for part one of our delve into 1992, this is a good point to sign off on. We've got to talk about Steven Seagal, Wesley Snipes, and a lot of other stuff in part two, and it's worth joining us for. So join us on part two.
Yes. For now, though, until we return, we just want to say a very big thank you to our very special guest, Bill Daly, for joining us here on the first installment of our Look Back. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you for having me.
And he'll be wearing the same clothes on the next one.
I can change.
Yeah. Fuck the
You
continuity.
could never change, Bill.
Thank God.
For now, though, it is a goodbye from me.
And a goodbye from me too.
Bye.